That means we should be, let's wait a bit until we get this running on YouTube. Okay, I think now we're live on YouTube. Perfect. We have slowly people coming in. I think we can wait for a couple of minutes and then we'll jump into the sessions.
Potentially, we could discuss what are we going to talk about, and maybe some pre-talk. And
yeah, that's very right. So maybe I could share the my screen here shortly with our Meetup page, and yeah, we have already some people that join. You should be able to see my screen, folks, right?
We hope.
Yeah, I think so. So, well, I think we can start moving slowly. So, thanks for everybody attending the session, and thanks to Phat and Pasha for accepting the invitation and being part of the Kotlin Meetup for Munich, May 2021 edition. Today it's going to be Phat and me talking about the new features that have been released on Kotlin 1.5.0. And then later, Pasha, developer advocate for JetBrains, will be speaking about what Kotlin has brought into the world of testing. So for anybody attending the meetup, you should be watching us through YouTube. If you have any question, feel free to write it on the question panel on your right side. And we'll read those questions and chat with you when our session is over. But just feel free to write whatever you want and have any comments. We would love to chat with you about anything related topic or any question that you may have. So I think we're starting Phat. So the first session with Phat is going to be shared. I will be presenting with Phat, and then Pasha will do it standalone. So Phat, if you want, you can start sharing your screen, and we jump into that.
Yeah. Let me share my screen.
So Pasha, I'll remove you temporarily until we're done with the session, and I'll catch up with you when we're done.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you confirm it? You can see my screen very well?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. So thanks, Enrique, for the introduction. So and thanks for everyone for joining. So it's 11 p.m. now. We are in Vietnam right now, and today we are going to talk about what's new in the Kotlin 1.5.0. And what we want to achieve in the presentation is giving you a very key highlight in terms of the language features of the Kotlin JVM, native, and JS. And later on, we will have to Enrique to support cover for the multi-platform and Kotlin test library, and also for the Kotlin X library as well. So very quick introduction about, so we are now based in Vietnam, and we are working together at the same team. And that building for the logistic apps. Then we are working at Lazada, Alibaba, parts of the Alibaba operate. And yeah, for the first thing that JVM record now supports. So in the record is a new features that just newly introduces in the JDK 15 and 16. By having, they have a very similar concept to that class, if you want to think in that way. So by having a record before the person, it will generate it for you for the constructor. Of course, it will have for the toString and equal and hash code as well. So it's very tempting for people to forget to implement this kind of implementation, because sometimes it will lead into the unexpected behavior. For example, there will be something wrong with the comparing for two different lists by forgetting of implement for the equal function. And also it will generate for you the name and the age function here, which is giving you access for the properties of defining in the class itself. So one thing I really like here is that they don't follow for the convention from the Java bin, but now we can have the name and age here instead of get name and get age. So and thanks to Kotlin, that's to support for the Java interoperabilities, right? So for that use case, we can actually use things for Java and record by defining this one in Kotlin, and we also so it will generate it for the user class, which is inherit from the record class from java.learn.record, but to get the compiler to understand it, one, you have to meet for some requirement from Kotlin. For example, that should be you cannot using for the backing field. For example, you also cannot extend the class with any class in Kotlin, like the class name any or any class, because by default it will be generated for the class that inherit from the record class. So yeah, this is nice. And it's because Kotlin only wants support for the JVM interoperabilities. So for that use case, we recommend to use for the JVM record. Otherwise, I think is for me, I would suggest to use for the data class instead. The next thing is for the CEO interface. So they share a similar concept with the class and also for its interface, right? So right now, previously, when we have previously, when we have the CEO class, which is you have the subclass, it can extend for one CEO class, but right now one class can implement for multiple CEO interfaces, right? So you can get the benefits from using the exhaustive when statement here, when it will generate for you on the on the cases, on the possible implementation here. You even don't have to define the else statement here, because not by default it will generate for you on the implementation. Except for the multi-platform, you still need to use L. So in this case, let's say if you want to cover for the case of Polygon, it will generate for all possible implementation, and it also work with the hierarchy of viewable. And one more thing that to improve for the CEO class now is you, instead of having everything to be defined in one file, right? You can have own files, on the subclass of them to be located in the same compilation unit on the same package. And also right now you don't have to get your direct subclass to be located inside the class, but also can support you at the top level and also inside nested inside any number of named class, interface, or the object. And one more thing is here is that in order to get for the compiler to identify the name properly or your subclass, you cannot use for the local and also for the anonymous objects here. But it's something really handy here. So let's say you want to extend for a CEO class, which is already implemented in one particular library. For example, in this case, we have package com.chef here, when we also have the CEO class Polygon already implemented in that package. And this is one of the relevant thing belong and located in that library. So by default, on the subclass should be located in the same compilation unit and the same package. So it's really easy that you can extend it outside of the library. This is something that raising to get for your attention for that when you want to extend for the library. So another very cool feature is that this is an inline value class, which is now stable in version 1.5.0. So let's consider for the use case, if we want to have the function to get the current time with a particular time zone. In this case, I have a function here, which is very simple. We take a type here, which is long, right? And then we just print out to get a current time, but it's not very clear. This is a 5, the parameter is 5 hours, or this is +5 or -5 in terms of the time zone gap, right? So for using privatized, it's obviously it's working properly, but it's not really clear how people can use it, can understand for the parameters. what if we can use for the regular class? So very simple implementation. Here we can construct for the class that take default either 0 time zone, right? And also we have a function which is a +7 here. So now we are now based in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, the time zone is +7. So we have a function that taking a time zone object here, and we can making a very simple calculation to have the time zone to be +7. And then when we want to get for the time zone, it is working probably, but the problem is that it's more or less we need to manage for the object allocation for this, which is more or less harmful to the long-term development, right? So Kotlin introduced in 1.4 for the inline functions, and 1.5 they have something called inline value class, which is a set of the very long definition of value class. But let's take a look at a very simple version right here. So we have the very same thing, right? The very same thing, but only introduces a value before the class. So under the hood of this function, we will see that for the get current time, so instead of passing for the entire object into the parameters, it's basically passing for the value of that class inside the function. So it have us on, pass by for the overheading for the how to allocate for the object. In terms of the RAM and so for resources that we can use in the development in general. And same thing for other functions for the +7, they also passing like 0 +7 down here instead of putting the entire object into that one. And one more thing is that for the Kotlin JVM, so we have the backend. We actually have the backend for the native, for the JVM, and also for the JS. We want to have everything to be analyzed from the front end side, and from the backend side, we can generate for the executable. So Kotlin generate, and we have for the backend IR here it stands for internal representation, right? So now the IR base, from the Kotlin perspective, they want to unify all the backend, and now unify at one person to get a benefit from the same pipeline. So to welcome probably in newer version, there will be some compiler extension to be included in the pipeline. But this is enabled by default. But if you want to still you want to use for the old backend, so let's define the Kotlin option here, and then you can still use for the old backend normally without any problem. But in the case of the multi-platform, if you define for using for the IR backend, there could be a lot of benefits because you will only get the latest of the new features, bug fix, or any optimization from backend JVM here. The next thing is, I think this is a great improvement because for me personally, and also for my previous project, which is a production ready, right? So version 1.8 is a very stable version. And in this version, from Java, they also introduce many key features that we are using in a daily basis, like streaming, like lambda expression, and other cool features. So having the target version to be 1.8 will be helping us, especially for the mobile developer, Android developer. So we don't have to target expressly target for the 1.8 version anymore. And one more thing, in 1.4, Kotlin introduced our annotation, which is a JVM default, which is supported to generated for the default method for the instructor. But after one version, after the experiment, is actually deprecated in this version. So that would be a very long story of the Java and so for Kotlin to support for these features. But I put in here for the pictures for more intuitive. Right. For example, we have the interface base here. which is support for the default method foo that just printing out for the value 0. But for the Kotlin class, that is implement for interface base here. We don't do anything because we already have the full function to have the default one to be returned by 0, right? We also have another interface that implement base here. So, but if it want to change the return value is 42. So if you can see here, let's say if you want to use this kind of implementation interface in a class in another class in Java, and you want to extend from Kotlin class and the interface here. So let's say if you want to define for the full function here, so that should be 42 or 0. So I think to overcome that, this headaches and complicated relationship, so this is no longer supported by the Kotlin, especially for the JVM. And I think that is pretty much from my end. You can take over from here, Enrique. You are on mute, Enrique.
Now you should be able to see my screen, right? Can you hear me, Phat? Yeah. Okay. Great. So yeah, let's keep moving now with Kotlin native and what brings into the table. Like with any release from Kotlin, there is a number of goodies coming in Kotlin native, GIS, and multi-platform. Let's start with Kotlin native. It's mostly focusing on performance improvements and some small things later. So Kotlin 1.5.0, Kotlin native after 1.5.0 is more performant and stable. There has been a few performant improvements. Now the compiler caches are supported for Linux, Linux host and iOS ARM64 targets. And according to JetBrains, when the compiler cache has been enabled, most compilations complete much faster, except the first one. On average, JetBrains is claiming that this happens, increases the speed by 200% on their test projects. If you want to use them on any project, you would need to go on the Gradle properties, and if you want to activate it for iOS ARM, you would use the above line. For Linux, you would use the line at the bottom. Kotlin native in 1.5.0 deactivates the memory leak checker. This memory leak used to come with the Kotlin native, and it was designed mostly for internal use, and it was able to find leaks on apparently less cases that it was expected, not all the time that a leak was happening, and it was apparently causing, being the reason for a few application crashes. So now it's just disabled by default. If you want to activate it again, under your own responsibility, of course, you just need to add this the following line, and then the memory leak checker would be active. Kotlin JavaScript, it has upgraded to Webpack 5. I'm not a very big web person. If you're into web, you probably know better about the improvements that are coming with Webpack 5. This is apparently the only goodie that is coming with Kotlin JS on Kotlin 1.5. Now, Kotlin multi-platform, the framework to compile in different architectures and used mostly on for our mobile apps, right? So Kotlin 5.0 comes with a few improvements regarding, especially in the standard library and Kotlin multi-platform. One of the changes that is bringing is there are now stable unsigned integer types. uint, ulong, byte, and sort are now stable. And the same goes for operations on those types, ranges, and progressions. Unsigned arrays and operations remain in beta. Now, there is some agnostic API for either upper or lowercase in the text. In earlier versions, we were using to uppercase, to lowercase, capitalize, and decapitalize. And this has changed a little bit. As you can see in this example, the left column could be the previous name, naming convention, starting on 150, we have this this new alternative. And the same applies for char functions. In the case of char functions, we would have the equivalence of the string with a suffix char at the end, something like uppercase charge, lowercase charge, title case charge, etc. Let me hide. I always keep this hide this here. Okay, now it should be better, I think. Yeah. So the Phat API. So we used to, or there is this experimental Phat API that had extensions for the Java Phat class, and it's now stable. So this is an example on how it looks like. We could have the Phat object that will construct our base dir. We could keep adding subdirectories to this dir. And from there, we could do things such as list directories that we have inside. We could filter by file, etc. The standard library includes a couple of operations for modular arithmetics. They have been added to the standard library. One is the floor div that returns the result of a floor division available for integer types, and mod that returns the remainder of the floor division, so the known as modulus, and it's available for all the numeric types. The operations look quite similar, but they obviously produce different results. So if we check this example from here, at the bottom we have the floor division -5/3, calling the floor division function. What do you think happens when we call this function? This works better in personal meetups. We can leave a few seconds of mystery and fear until you can think of this. So this would be returning 1. And what happens if we execute the second function, the truncated division in this case, using just the remainder model? So what do you think will get displayed? -2, exactly. So yeah, now we have those functions available, so available on Kotlin multi-platform. There is also changes on the duration API. Before we had this experimental duration class that was used to represent duration amounts, or the amount of duration of time in different time units. With 150, there are the following changes. The internal value representation is now using long instead of double, so the precision is better. There is a new API for conversion to a particular time unit in long, and replaces the former API, which operates with double. For instance, if we use in whole minutes, we will return the value of the duration expressed as a long, and this replaces the previous function in minutes. And there is a new companion function for constructing a duration object. If we call the extension function seconds that receives an integer, creates a duration object representing the number of seconds as an integer. And the previous former extension properties, such as seconds, they are deprecated. So in this example from here, we would be calling the duration.milliseconds. We pass 120,000 as an integer, and then we try to call the function in whole seconds and then in whole minutes. So what we came from after calling this could be there are 120 seconds in 2 minutes. So one of my favorites. We have now the function first not null off, and I'll never be able to pronounce this properly. The first not null off or null off or null. Those functions combine map not null with first or null. So they map the original collection with the custom selector function and returns the first not null value. If there is no such value, first not null off throws an exception, nothing catch, and first not null off or null returns null. So after this tongue twister, let's gonna see this example. What do you think the first example would return when we have a list of Kotlin 1.5 and we call first not null off over and trying to pass it to double or null. So in that case, we'll get 1.5. We just try to convert 1.5 to double or null. Kotlin cannot be converted. 1.5 can get converted. In the second case, when we try to make a first not null of or null, and trying to pass this as an integer or null, what's the result? We get null. It doesn't crash. We just display or we get a null as a result. We have now, similar in terms of handling exceptions, 2 new functions that introduce case-sensitive strict versions of toBoolean. toBoolean strict, which throws an exception for all inputs except true and false, and toBoolean strict or null that returns null for all inputs except the literals true or false. So the first function here, true to Boolean strict, returns true. It's one of both literals, either true or false. And one returns null when we call to Boolean strict or null, because it's neither true or false. However, if we call the commented line to Boolean strict over 1, we will get an exception and the application will crash. So there are also on the Kotlin test library a few improvements. Honestly, I didn't have too much time to get through them. There are simplified test dependencies, usage in the multi-platform projects. There is an automatic selection of testing framework for Kotlin JVM. And there are a few updates on the assertion function. Last but not least, we have the Kotlin X libraries. I remember you that all those functions have support for Kotlin multi-platform. So we have coroutines 1.5.0, the release candidate is already live. Serialization 1.2.0, which Pasha maybe can comment later on that. But if I recall correctly, it has some important problems, and those will get fixed in an upcoming patch or an upcoming fixed version. And the datetime library 0.2.0 is also available. That's pretty much everything coming on Kotlin 1.5.0. I would like to remind you that there is going to be a Kotlin 1.5 online event the 25th of May. And you're able to, if you just Google this event, you'll be able to see it on the first result on Google. You can register and you'll get some notifications when this is happening. You can, there is a live question and answer sessions with the Kotlin team, so it will be definitely very interesting. If you want to check the fully and comprehensive list of goodies and new things coming on the version 1.5, you just can go into this website, just Google otherwise what's new in Kotlin 1.5, kotlinlag.org, and you'll be able to access it. So thank you for being a fantastic public. We had a lot of joy presenting with you and presenting for you. If you have any question or is there any aspect that you would like to discuss and we know the answers to those questions, we would be super happy to support you. So remember that you can write on the chat if you have any question. Yes, no questions. Well, you can reach us always in if you probably follow us on Twitter. On Twitter, we tweet well with the Phat, my handle, and the handle from Pasha for later. Otherwise, if you want to write on the Meetup group later, we will also be able to read there. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy, learn at least one new more thing, and without further delay, we would like to say hello to our next speaker, Pasha.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Enrique and Phat. It was very interesting. By the way, I had asked you one question in private chat, but I'm not sure if it's relevant. It was about JVM inline. I was interested if it does support additional functions inside body.
Mm. Well, I'm not really sure. Do you know that, Phat?
So, Yeah, I think JVM in Light will be support additional function inside the body like the normal class. And also one requirement here is that they will need only one single property to be defined in the primary constructor. So let's say in the runtime they want at the compiler's perspective, right? They have only one time. So let's say when we transfer when they put the instance of the object there, and then from compiler they will understand that is only single properties, and they can get and pass directly into the function. So I think, yeah, for your question, they do support for additional function in the body like normal, but they require to have single primary constructor with single property.
Thank you very much. It sounds interesting that it looks like now we have duplicate functionality of Kotlin built-in inline classes, which are still opt-in, I believe, and experimental, and support for JVM inline classes, which is stable. And it's interesting how to select, but I think it's question for future versions when inline classes will be stabilized. So.
One more question. There is going to be at some point soon a new version of the serialization library, right?
Yeah, and the best thing I love there is improved deserialization of JSON. Currently, there is space for improvements in Kotlin serializations, in deserialization of JSON, and it should become much faster. If you are aware of Projector project by JetBrains, it's about showing your ID inside browser, for example, on your iPad or just on your desktop if you don't have powerful laptop enough. Author of Projector have chosen not to use Kotlin X serialization because of this issue, and hopefully he will migrate back when Kotlin X serialization with improved JSON handling will be released.
Okay, well, super looking forward to that new update, and that might be who knows, Kotlin 1.5.1 or just a single patch on the library.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, yeah, we hope that you enjoyed. And Pasha, you'll be talking about Kotlin and testing and why Kotlin and how Kotlin can be used for tests. So the stage is all yours. Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you, Enrique and Phat. It was very interesting, and I've acknowledged new things, at least several. I didn't know everything you told. And welcome, everyone. My name is Pasha Finkelshteyn. I'm developer advocate at JetBrains, and I'm advocating for big data and data engineering, but still I love Kotlin. And I love testing, and that's why I'm talking about what Kotlin brought to the testing field. Because everybody knows that there are lots of things which Kotlin brought into development, but what about testing? And look, there are plenty of instruments for testing. There are JUnit, TestNG, there are multiple libraries like Makita and so on. There are like property-based testing libraries and so on. And Java has a very rich ecosystem. I mean, it's huge. It's much bigger than Kotlin native one. And also, Java has proven over years technologies. And when I say it has proven over years technologies, it's a very cool thing for enterprise development, because you want to use tested technologies you are sure they will work in your production. But sometimes it means legacy. For example, something like Wildfly is considered to be legacy sometimes because not everyone want to work with them. So, and what Kotlin gave us? Kotlin gave us things which could improve current ecosystem of Java, and it even could be a better Java. Kotlin gave us new DSLs, extension methods, and functions as first-class citizens. I'm not going to dive deeply in what is extension method. I hope you'll know the same about DSL. And of course, about functions as first-class citizens. Let's just say for case that DSL is domain-specific language. It's a way to define some domain in our specific language developed in Kotlin, and then use very specific constructions very, very specific to our domain. And functions as first-class citizens allow us to pass any lambda anywhere and call it nicely without some, ugly things like .apply from Java. And actually, I like it. And also, Kotlin brought us plenty of libraries, new libraries, for example, new HTTP clients like Fuel HTTP. And OK HTTP was rewritten from Java to Kotlin. So currently, OK HTTP is kind of Kotlin library too, and many others. But why am I talking about all this? Well, I think that current state of Java testing in Java is not perfect, and it has space for improvements. For example, how our usual testing class looks like. It's something like this, like class my very important test with test 1, test 2, test 3, and so on and so on. Just imagine you are testing some complex service, and it has like 10 methods or 20 methods, and you need to have like 3 to 5 to 10 maybe tests per every method to be sure that it works correctly. How will such class look like? It will very, very long and barely readable and almost unstructured. Nobody can say in what order are tests going there. How should I look for tests testing my concrete method? It's huge pain, and it's something like Welcome to the Disco World by Terry Pratchett. I don't like it. We want nice things, right? We want to say that our test is testing password service, which should hash, and it should have some length, and it should have some salt, and it should check maybe something with, and we should test valid passwords and invalid passwords. And look at this, it's pseudocode, it's not real Kotlin, but it could be real Kotlin, of course. Look how structured it is. We are reading it almost as a book with table of contents. And okay. Let's not talk about the structure and, disco world of tests. There are other pitfalls too. Do you know what parameterized tests are? Just to refresh, parameterized tests are the concept when you want to pass several different values to your method and to understand if it tests them correctly. For example, here is the example of test-ng parameterized test. Basically, that's why people have used test-ng for years, because it had built-in concept of parameterized tests. But notation is ugly. It's really ugly. It's like two-dimensional array of objects. It's not even typed. There are like 2, true, 6, false. These objects are not readable if you don't know the domain. And then these objects are being passed to method test prime number checker, and they are typed already. And if you have error in your data, test will compile, but it will fail at runtime. Maybe very late it will fail, because types won't match. Okay, but then JUnit 5 appeared, and it's really better. And now it operates with concept called parameterized test, and there are functions called arguments, and you pass stream of these arguments. To be honest, I'm not sure if why they're using stream, not array, because there is nothing lazy here, and we can't modify this stream in any way after it's generated. There always should be a stream of arguments. And then we pass it to method test with multi-arc method source. By the way, this is from official documentation for JUnit 5. And okay, it accepts again like new arguments, and this is still untyped. Okay, there are no those ugly curly braces, but arguments is not much better. I mean, this code is still too noisy. There are annotations, and we don't want these annotations because why do we need them at all? We would like to generate data where we need it. We still have a races list. Of course, in your Java, it would look better because there is a list.off, but that's all. And what I don't like about it is strings. Look at this code again. There is static method called string int and list provider, and we should type the name of this method inside a string method source, which is error prone, to be honest. I mean, there are real chances then that we will make a typo and error should appear only in runtime again. And we are using typed languages. We don't want this. We want everything to be checked. Okay, maximum things to be checked in compile time. And also, it's separate methods. Why I don't like separate methods? Because one day somebody will put the new test between our methods and then one more test and one more test, because why not? It doesn't break anything. Maybe nobody will even notice that something that has changed. And then after 2 years of development, you'll go to those tests because it's broken finally, and you're trying to find the source of your data, and it's in some completely another place from your code. And by the way, look at this. Eclipse and IntelliJ IDEA have concept of method sorting. So possibly they will move those data providers to the very top of the file, and you won't be able to see really what's going on, what data we are working with. A test should be easy to read, right? Because it's manifestation of developers who are entering the project, and they know that when they will understand the tests, they will understand how system works. And that's a cool thing, but currently Java ecosystem stops us from writing tests in nice way. So let's try to fix it, and that's what I'm going to speak about today. How can it be fixed with real existing technologies? But first, I want to give a small sage of enterprise security. Like, imagine you're in enterprise, and one day you decide to store passwords. I hope that most enterprises one day store passwords, right? Of course, you have several choices. For example, you can store them in plain text. It has some faults, right? For example, somebody can steal your database and read your passwords and reuse them. And then MD5 comes in, and because hashing is something better, right? And then we understand that MD5 has collisions, and we are trying to MD5 hash plain text, plain password plus salt, and then MD5 in 2 layers, but nothing works really here because on quite old already NVIDIA 1080, they can test 200 gigahashes per second. I mean that it will be minutes for 12-character password. So what should we do? We can cry, or we can use bcrypt or scrypt. Bcrypt and descrypt are libraries for hashing, and what's interesting about bcrypt, it generates hashes which start from some strange weird string $sign to $, and then some number. 2a is a version of bcrypt, and the second number is number of salting rounds current recommended number of salting rounds is around 20, but maybe there are even more strong algorithms. Maybe bgrep isn't up to date, but still it's very slow. Currently, we can brute force with speed like hundreds of thousands passwords per second, which is much, much better. And by the way, NVIDIA won't help here. So we have now we know something about hashing, and we know it because it will be in live demo, and it's time to start it. Let me reshare my screen. Not those. Yeah. Here it is. Let me check. Yeah, looks like it's shared. Okay. First thing, do you remember about test structure I've been talking about? Here is it. It's implemented. Like we have class password service ktests, which is extended from should spec. Should spec is just one of ways to write tests with cotest, and it allows us to define context and should. Like password hash should not be equal to password itself, should start with $to a $10 by default, and when we are using 12 rounds of salting, it should start with $to a and $12. Let's run this context, and okay, it will take some time to compile, and then we will try to break tests, because if tests always green, it's something is not correct. Okay, let's change the number of salting rounds here and recheck again. Currently, I hope that it will fail. Okay, and of course it fails. Give me a minute to open it. And we want to read the error message. Yeah, here it is. Look how awesome these error messages are. This string should start with $to a and $12, because it's what's hard-coded in our test actually. And it diverged and at index 5. Imagine that test is a little bit more complex. It works with some longer strings. It's very useful to know at which point text start diverge, because I've fallen in this situation multiple times when I see two almost identical strings and they do not work for me. They are not the same, but I fail to see where they are starting to diverge. Okay, but it's not the same. The most interesting part, because okay, it works for some password, but let's check it. Let's check that when we are using our password service, we can test it with all data we want and check that check password function still works as we expect. Notice, no separate methods, no special annotations, only one method for all where we are describing all the data we want to check. And of course, we should fail this. We should ensure that sometimes we can break this test too, because you should know that I'm not lying to you, I believe. I hope that, yeah, of course it fails. And let's look at test names. They even include the string we wanted to test against, and that's awesome. And we can break one more test, but nothing interesting here. And that's all about what I can say right now about data-driven testing. But there is one more interesting concept, and I have a story about it actually. I was working for La Moda as data engineer, and one day our data scientists came to me and said that they have implemented hash function by themselves. hash function called murmur hash, weird name, right? It's quite legacy, but I know that nobody should ever implement anything connected to cryptography themselves, because it's complex. It's very easy to make a mistake, maybe even simple mistake. So I said, okay, man, please give me a function for murmur hash, and let's check if it works correctly. And here starts the second part of my demonstration. He gave me like his function. It's murmur2 hash, some weird things about left shifts, right shifts. It's Java. Okay, it looks nice at least. I can't find if there is any mistake, so I'm writing the simple test. Simple tests, which looks like that. Okay, I'm just calling the same for all, for admin, godlove, and so on. And test works, and I think, okay, maybe that's those situation when somebody have implemented hash function correctly. But then I think, okay, is it possible that I didn't see all options that users can provide for hashing? And answer is basically yes, because I haven't tried even empty string here, right? I haven't tried, Russian letters. I'm from Russia, so there may be data in Russian here. So I'm using another concept, not data-driven testing, but property-based testing. Property-based testing is testing when not you are generating data for input of your methods, but computer itself. For example, how beautiful it is. For all is for data-driven testing, and check all is for property-based testing. They all are included into cotest library. And then we provide generator. We need arbitrary strings of length, for example, 20, and then which will consist alphanumeric, hiragana, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Let's just run this and see if it works. Again, it will take some, but not too long time, I believe. Yeah, it's already failed. And let's check why. Okay, property test failed. Look how complex this string is. It's mixed Egyptian hieroglyphs, hiragana, and at least I can see numbers. And what is interesting is not only is what code test says us, not only that test has failed, but what gone wrong. Okay, here is the failing string, and now Cotest tries to shrink and to find minimal reproducer on which our test will fail. For that, Cotest one by one replaces symbols by a character and says us, okay, let's here. The minimal reproducer is this. Actually, of course, we could delete this A symbols and it will still fail. Cotest is not smart enough to understand this, but at least we have reproducer right now. We can write simple test, and I'm trying to find magic number, but I failed to do it. Okay, somewhere here we could find a magic number which could allow us to run property-based test with, here it is. No, okay, I can find it, sorry. Which will allow us to rerun this test with this concrete data set and get exactly the same error. So we can write new unit test to recheck after property-based test, or we can rerun the same exact property-based test with the same seed, random seed. Okay. Of course, I've reported this to data science folks, and they said, okay, actually, we don't care because we don't need to have consistent implementation of murmur hash consistent with specification. We need only consistency with our own results. So there is absolutely no way that we will rewrite it. And I said, okay, if it works for you, then it works for you. But at least now you know that it worked formally. It works incorrectly. Okay, the next important thing I want to say about is mocking and async objects. As in every enterprise, I have some repository. It's called user repo. It's some service which is called user service. And of course, I could use Makita, which we all know, which allows us to mock anything. But I prefer to use another instrument called mock-k. Its syntax is much more, it's much more simple. It's much more idiomatic for Kotlin, and I like how it looks like. So here we are creating some DTO, and here is those DSL. It's actually DSL. Every call of user rep create user with any argument, it just runs. Then we are creating a user service, and then we are verifying something. Give me a minute and we'll come back to this. I'm trying to, yeah. And what is interesting, we can actually define nested things. For example, when we are mocking something, for example, user to, we can call every, what do we have here? Okay. I can find anything appropriate, so we'll skip this part. But anyways, we can mock things as deep as we want, and it will look like nested. This nested, and one more block, and then one more on the any deep depth we need. Sometimes it's useful when we do not want to mock everything. We just need to be sure that some methods or some fields are mocked, and that's very cool. And one more thing you can see right on the screen right now is another expectations framework. Like we could use asserts from Kotlin.test, but I'm using a library called Atrium, which allows us to write. To write almost, in natural language, expect this to be something else. And sometimes we can write very interesting things. For example, imagine that we need to check some object, fields of object. It will, with usual Kotlin test, it will look like field A, assert to be something, and so on. Here we can use nice thing called feature, and we can reuse this feature, of course. For example, last name should be something, and for example, password should not be null and starts with some string, and so on. There are beautiful matchers of collections where we can check if something is in order or out of order. We can match pretty much everything. And we can write this way too, if you like dots. I don't like dots, to be honest, but basically it works how you want. It's usual function. And one more thing, if you are using JUnit right now, you are possibly using those test annotations because they're nice. Okay, it's Disco World, but still, I have annotations. And what if you like CoTest and want to migrate to it? That's simple. You're just extending your class from annotation spec, and then you magically have then you, of course, you should delete a couple of imports like before each and test, and they will be imported automatically because they're members of annotation spec. So you don't need to rewrite lots of code to migrate from JUnit to Kotest, and that's the nice thing. One more nice thing is Kotest is cross-platform. I'm not sure if everything works on the iOS. I'm almost sure that should spec won't work in on the iOS, but for JVM, for JS, and for Android, it definitely should work, which is only nice, which is also a nice thing. And that's pretty much almost all. So now we have a couple of minutes. Let's go to conclusions. What should we remember? Kotest solves problems of structure. Our tests doesn't have to be flat, doesn't have to have flat structure anymore. They can be very deeply nested if we need this. And also there is something like BDD in behavior-driven design of tests for Kotest. It solves for problem of parameterized testing. We don't need any, third-party instruments. We don't need special libraries for that. And of course, property-based testing, which is done simply beautiful because it even finds the minimal reproducer for us, which is very cool as of me. Also, there is lots of other libraries for helping in our testing. Is Mock, for example, Mock-K and Atrium. Check them; they are awesome too. That's all. Thank you very much for your time. It's time for questions. It was Pasha Finkelshteyn. I'm from JetBrains. Please subscribe to my Twitter. It's Asmodio. It's on your screens right now. And welcome.
Thank you so much, Pasha. Great talk.
Am I on time?
Yes, perfectly on time.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Perfectly on time. So, folks, if you have any question, feel free to write it on the chat. Otherwise, I might start, Pasha. Do you have, so when we're testing coroutines, I don't know if that's something that you've done before?
Okay. That's an interesting question, actually, because everything in Kotest is coroutinated. I mean, every method is a suspend function. So for you, testing coroutines wouldn't differ in any way from testing regular methods, which is awesome too. And for example, if you are using a sync HTTP client inside your test, because you can, like Fuel, it will work awesome with Kotest because you can run plenty of those HTTP requests which are suspend functions.
Okay, yeah, I think the topic of testing something that is suspended, sometimes I don't think there are extremely clearly guidelines on how to do it. For instance, there is this
Kotest is just testing, not it doesn't different in any way, I believe.
By the way, you wrote, Pasha, the link of the repo. I think it's better if you write it on the comment section. It was on the private chat. If you write it on the comments,
I can't write in comments. I can write only in private chat, but I don't have rights to write in comments.
Oh, yeah. That's
thank you, Enrique. It is the link to my presentation. If you wanted to check it later or anything, just feel free to contact me and ask any questions. Currently, it looks like that there are no more questions.
No, that seems so. We get finally in those meetups, the wide majority of attendees come after the meetup when we send this in a few mailing list and everything. So I think they can easily find you on Twitter, right? As Modio.
Yeah.
In case they need to reach out.
And it's written right here and in presentation and everywhere.
Okay, great. Then, folks, if you don't have questions, you're going to miss the chance. But you can always reach Pasha, Phat, or me on Twitter and find us easily on the internet.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you to dear audience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to everybody, and yeah, let's keep in touch for upcoming meetups.
Yeah, sure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.